It's one of those late March days that has every single type of weather in it, and right now it's on and off again blustery weather, which is why I'm in the shed to record this video. And as you can see behind me, there are quite a few tools, lots of things sticking up and around, and it's more than one person actually needs, and that is because I'm at the allotment. Which brings me to a question I get asked quite a lot, and that is, what is an allotment? And how is it different from a vegetable garden? Or how is it different from a community garden? And so that's what I want to talk about today, and also the reasons that allotments are so important for people who want to grow their own food. First off, I know that as an American living in the Isle of Man, which is in Britain, I have a good mix of viewers. So I've looked at my analytics. Lots of people are from the Isle of Man and from Britain, UK, Scotland, Wales included in there, as well as Ireland. But also, I have a lot of people who are watching from across the pond. So in the United States, Canada, and even further afield. And when I mention the word allotment, some people will know what that means, but a lot of people have no clue. What exactly is an allotment? It looks like a vegetable garden. An allotment is a British institution, and every community pretty much has at least one, if not a dozen. London has so many, and the waiting lists to get a space at an allotment are 10 years or longer in many cases. Allotments go back to at least the 19th century, probably much longer before then, and they have references and illustrations of allotments that are from the 1700s. And essentially what they are is public land that is allocated, allocated to ordinary people who want to grow their own food for non-commercial purposes. And if a group of people come together and go to the local council and say, we want an allotment, it's actually in law that the city or the community has to find a field or space for those people to be able to grow their own food. And it's come about because of the way that land has been redistributed, and it's a way for, in the past, especially for poorer people to be able to feed themselves. Nowadays, allotments are much more for the leisure gardener. So a place for anyone to sign up for a plot of land to grow their own food. Now you're listening to all of this and you're like, got it. I know exactly what an allotment is. It's a community garden. And yes, it is in a way a community garden, but it is much different as well. So think of a community garden in many cases as a large field or even a smallish area that people garden on collectively. They garden on as a community. They might share the skills and the land and the harvests. Whereas an allotment, and in some cases, some community gardens, especially in the States, will be subdivided. And so it's more of individuals growing their own vegetables on their own turf. So it's like a patchwork quilt of vegetable gardens side by side. Whereas a community garden can be like that, but in many cases, it's not. This is my individual allotment here at our allotment field. And we would call it our allotment or our plot. And it begins with this bed here. And we'll walk down the side. I used to actually have this area as well, but it was just too much work for me, so I found a new tenant for it literally a couple days ago. But my plot comes down here past the lavender and the garlic that's growing there, and it comes down to this post. So this is the bottom boundary of my plot. And then all along the bottom here I grow thornless blackberries, and it creates a nice tidy boundary to my growing space. but it isn't something that's going to obstruct light. Just making use out of the space vertically as well. And my plot comes down actually to this area here. And it grows soft fruit, so blueberries, quite a few blueberry bushes in there, some currants. This area over here is not mine. It's another plot, so you can actually see the full size of a plot there. And we have it covered because it was covered in bindweed up until a couple of years ago. But hopefully we can find a tenant for it very soon. On my plot, I grow a real mix of things. Edible plants, perennial edibles. You can see that I still have some winter crops in here, beetroot, the last of the leeks, Spanish, black radishes, some kale and chard, just little bits and bobs. I like to plant a little bit of this here and a little bit of that here. Strawberry bed. If you've been following me, I've been talking about how I've been wanting to put a little pathway in the center, and I finally got that done a couple of days ago. So this is going to be my next job this coming week, is tidying up those strawberry plants. And then over here I have my wildlife pond, which is actually filled with tiny tadpoles right now. Let's have a look. You can see them against the stone really well. And these are all baby frogs. And the idea with the frogs is to support them, and they will support the garden, hopefully by eating slugs. And a lot of the plants that are planted behind the pond are there to provide cover, also medicinal plants, and also for pollinators, so lots of pollinator-friendly flowers. I grow loads of lavender, soft fruit, garlic, of course, lots of things. The way that an allotment is organized is you have a large field or area, usually that the council sets aside, but sometimes it's private land in a private association like ours is. And then that land is subdivided into individual plots. And plot sizes vary. They can be relatively small, or they can be as large as a tennis court. And I know people that have 2 allotments the size of a tennis court. And so you can get them in all shapes and sizes, and you also have various rules that go along with each association. So for example, our allotment is an organic garden, so people can apply to join here. We can parcel out different areas, so plots for them to grow on, but they have to use organic gardening practices. When you have an allotment, it can mean that you have a plot at a larger allotment field. So there's 2 ways that you use the word. And you pay an annual rent. And I know of some people that have rent-controlled allotments, and they pay something like £10 per year, which is, I guess, $15 for a pretty large space to grow on for the entire year. Our allotment is different. We're private, we have bills to pay, we've got to pay for the water, we've got to pay rent to the landowner because we don't actually own this field. There are lots of expenses, and so our rent for our allotment for a full-size plot is currently £70 a year. Our allotment is now 11 years old, and when we first started it was a pasture, so a big grassy field. And we had 30 plots marked out in blue baling twine. And since then we've realized that the standard plot size that we have here, 30 by 40 foot, is actually sometimes too much for people. And so we have quite a few half plots now, so divided those down. And once people get a hold of a plot, they can just crack on. They can put in beds if they wish, put down pathways. I help to organize manure and wood chip deliveries to help people with materials inexpensively. Other allotments permit sheds and greenhouses and polytunnels and all kinds of structures on individual plots, but we don't here. Instead, we have a communal shed, which you'll see over there, and that's where people can store their tools. And then anything else on individual plots needs to be kept to about 1 meter tall. So that includes any kind of fencing or netting or things like that. Permanent things or semi-permanent items. Obviously, if you're going to be putting up a trellis or something like that, that's different. You can take that down. And so that's how it works. if you want to grow a vegetable garden and you don't have the space for it, or you would like to grow in an environment where you can ask people for advice and have a little bit of a community feel, you can get in touch with an allotment here in Britain and see if they have any plots available. And if you're lucky, you get allocated an allotment, so a plot. You pay an annual rent, and then you can grow your garden for as long as you keep paying rent and keep maintaining your plot. Allotments are a given here in Britain, but elsewhere in the world, they're not. And I get so many comments from people saying that they wish that they could have their own space to grow in. And that is why allotments are essential and why I would like to see a lot more of them pop up around the world. Community gardens, allotments, it doesn't matter. Just space for people to grow their own. And I know that especially in places like the United States, you get guerrilla gardening and empty lots being transformed into places where people can grow their own food. But if the landowner, the person who owns that lot, comes along and decides, that's it, I'm selling it, or I'm building some kind of a building here, you don't have very much in the way of legal protection. Creating space for people to grow their own is the heart of what an allotment is. And it also provides rights to people who garden there, and it gives a really safe place for people to learn about food, to learn about nature, and to be able to explore all of that no matter how big or how small your home is. You could have a tiny apartment with not even a balcony and still have a large place to grow your own food. That's why it's important to keep allotments going and to get more of them on the board, to not shut them down, and to introduce more people around the world to the idea of creating space that's communal for people to grow their own. If you've got any more questions or comments about what an allotment is, leave them as a comment down below. I'll do my best to answer them. And also, go onto the internet and just Google allotments, and you will see a lot more about the history, the legalities, and the ways that you can start your own allotment as well. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time here on Lovely Greens. Bye for now. One last thing before you go. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe to Lovely Greens and click that little bell icon so that you get notifications for when new videos are out.